Afternoon, everybody. I'm going to try and keep you awake after that huge lunch. It was rather nice, so hopefully what I'm going to talk about will keep you engaged this afternoon. So yes, I'm going to start, as many good stories do, probably the best stories, in a hole in the ground. And those of you that know JORVIK perhaps know that it originated from the excavations that York Archaeological Trust did at Coppergate during the 1970s. Just to give you a bit of background in case you're not aware of these excavations, they were groundbreaking in many ways, excavations that started in 1976. It was a development, it was a new shopping centre that was going to be built in the centre of York, and initially we'd gone in as a trust to just do maybe a year, probably not even that, an excavation. But because of the level of preservation that was then discovered and the amount of archaeology that was discovered on this site, we were actually given 5 years to excavate this site, which was unprecedented at the time, and quite rightly so. And actually listening to Sophie this morning talk about the site in London, there's many similarities here. Obviously, we were doing it in the 70s. So this site revealed remains of not only the Viking city, but there were Roman remains there, medieval remains obviously that we went through. But it was a vast site and many different objects, a huge collection of objects and buildings that came out of it. Just to give you an idea of some of the things, these are some of the images from the 70s. Obviously, one of the unique things with these timber buildings from the Viking Age. But one of the other things that we did do, and again, this was obviously done in London, we invited people to come to the site during those 5 years. And we actually charged people to come to the site. Now, I don't know how much of that was being done in the 1970s, but you can see that. I think it was 35 pence you could pay to come in and see the site and meet the archaeologists and chat to them. And it was open 7 days a week. And over the 5 years then that we were open to the public, this site attracted 1 million visitors that came in. And this idea that it became ingrained in the memories of the people that visited and also that dug there as well. I mean, we also have done an oral history project quite recently, talking to people about their memories of the site. And you talk to anybody in York of a certain age and they will claim to have dug there. Not only that, then most of them claim that they found the Coppergate helmet, which is quite something. But yes, I mean, so when we were digging it, the team on site was made up of our team from York Archaeological Trust, but also students. We had a team coming from one of the open prisons, for example, that helped us on site. So it was quite a new thing that I think that we were doing at the time. But also we initiated this programme of public engagement. This is just one invitation that I found recently in the archive, this open evening at the Coppergate excavations. What I like about this is that it's sherry. I'm not sure how many site visits now offer a glass of sherry when you come in, but I quite like that. I think that's something we ought to readopt. But yes, so we did open evenings. We did a play, for example, that was on at the theatre, which Judy Dench was in, Dame Flora Robson was in, Bernard Cribbins. I've got the programme of this. I found sheet music for the Coppergate Calypso in our archive. So not only did we invite people to come and dig, but we did this whole programme during the 1970s of activity which invited people to get excited about what we were doing on the site and to join in. And we had many people involved. As I say, I mentioned a few that are in that play. One of the other people that was in that play, I think introducing it, was actually Magnus Magnusson, and you see him here, because it was sort of, as we got through the project, through the excavation, of course, these 1 million people and all these others that were interested and all the press that we got, the idea that we could maybe do something a bit more longer term was thought up. And Magnus Magnusson was invited in as a patron, as was Prince Charles. He became a patron as well, and various other leading celebrities and also royal families. The Queen of Denmark, for example, she was involved at one point as well. And the decision was taken that we would build the JORVIK Viking Centre from what we had been doing during the excavations. So This was in we finished the excavations in 1981 and we opened the first version of JORVIK in 1984. So there was a whole planning stage, and obviously this is one of our early drawings, quite space age, I think. It's quite Doctor Who. I quite like this one. It didn't look like this in the end. Those of you that perhaps came to the first version of JORVIK. And I normally, actually, one of the first things I ask is how many people have visited JORVIK, and I'm not sure, standing here in Ireland, if many people have, but many people say, well, we came during that first version of JORVIK, and this is one of the early drawings. And this is the sort of layout, which is a layout that we have stuck with ever since. And there have been 4 versions of JORVIK now. The first, as I say, that opened in 1984. The unique thing about JORVIK, and the thing we always say about JORVIK, is that it is based on the site where we found that archaeology. That the objects that we display in JORVIK are objects that we found on that site. It is the authenticity that we really do major on, and we think is the most important thing about JORVIK. So we have used the research, we have used the objects that we found and the buildings that we found, and also the environmental evidence that we found, because it was the site, as some of you will know, it was a waterlogged site, so the preservation levels were very high. And so the environmental evidence that we had enabled us to do all the things like the flora and fauna and even the smells, I think, which I'll come on to later, which we're known for. So this is the floor plan. This was the first version of JORVIK. It hasn't really altered much, because this is where we found the remains of certain houses and workshops and remains that sort of were associated with them. And as you can see from the figures that I've got there, we are ramping it up to, well, we're now on track. I think we might have just tipped over the 20 million mark at JORVIK, having reopened recently. So we had those various versions of it. This is the very first version, which some of you may remember. We've always had those figures in there, but they've changed over the time. So just to give you a bit of a trip down memory lane, this is the first version of JORVIK. That's very 1980s, I think. You can tell that's 1980s. But again, you can see the figure there in the background. One of the things that we did very early on was take the skull, one of the skulls we found. We found very few human remains actually on the site. There wasn't a burial ground that we actually dug into. This chap here, the fisherman, is actually there's only 2 figures that remain from the very first version. He's one of them, and his face was recreated from one of the skulls that we found. So that was quite a new thing, I think, at the time, and he's still there, the newer version of him. And the other chap that we've had all the way through is the man on the toilet, who is still there. So this is the year 2000 version of JORVIK. You can see the fisherman again there, sat with his friend. That's the same figure, but you can see how it's progressed. But it's always been based on the archaeology that we found. We've always been able to reinterpret the site in some way, because obviously research and interpretation moves on, and we as an organisation, York Archaeological Trust, are continuously working on our research, working with other partners such as the universities to develop different areas. So we're in the very happy position of being able to build new themes and new resources into JORVIK, which is something I'll come on to in a minute when we get onto our 2016 version. This again, 2000 version, this is the ride. Some of you will have remember the first ride which ran along the floor. This is the ride that we currently have now. Some of you may also recognise Dr. Richard Hall, who's on there with his 2 young boys as they were. And Richard, of course, was the he was the archaeologist in charge of Coppergate, and he worked with us on those first few versions of JORVIK, and sadly died a few years ago. But this is what happened in 2015. Some of you may have seen this on the news. So this happened on the day after Boxing Day. I was sat at home on my sofa enjoying the remnants of Christmas, and I got the call from my site manager, because we're open to the public. We've got water pouring in through the back door. We've got visitors in. What should we do? So we got rid of everybody out of the centre, obviously, and then we spent the whole day rescuing the objects. So about 1,000 objects in JORVIK. So we did have to rebuild, we had to redevelop. So one of the very early decisions that we made, and we did make it early on, because the insurers came in, we were insured, thankfully, and the insurers said, right, yes, we will pay you to rebuild it, but you must rebuild it the same as it was before. And we thought that was rather a wasted opportunity, because, as I say, things move on, research has moved on, and actually since we'd done the last refurbishment in 2000, the last major one, even though we did a very small one in 2010, we felt that there was many more stories we wanted to tell. So we said, okay, you give us the money to rebuild it, but then we will fundraise for the balance and we will actually reimagine it and build in all these new stories, which is what they accepted, which was great actually, because it was a huge opportunity for us then to do something slightly different, but not altogether different. So these are just a few images now of our starting point. So we flooded in December 2015. By the summer of 2016 we cleaned it, and we had to clean it because you can imagine what was in the flood waters, because we tested it and it wasn't very nice. So we wanted to make sure it was dry, so every time we removed something, literally another gallon of water came flooding out at us. So we had to make quite sure that we were clean and dry before we actually started rebuilding. And at the same time, of course, we were fundraising as well to rebuild it. And we started rebuilding in about the July of 2016. And leaping forwards to April 2017, which is when we reopened. So this is just a quick image. I haven't got many images. I've got a few of the new version of JORVIK. As you can see, it's still got the ride base. That was the only thing that survived because it was out of the water. Even though the sound system and everything went, we had to renew all of that. Everything else was rebuilt. And you can see that we opened on the 8th of April 2017, which was quite an apt date actually, because JORVIK originally opened in 1984 on the 8th of April as well, which was quite a nice well-rounded story. But actually, while we were rebuilding JORVIK, one of the things I talked very early on about the fact that a lot of people have ownership of JORVIK, particularly those people from York. They've visited numerous times. Perhaps they'd been as children with schools, then they'd brought back their own children. We're getting a lot of that now. We're actually getting third generation back through JORVIK now. But it was a great opportunity to do more in the city while JORVIK wasn't there. We particularly wanted to remain in the public eye because we were fundraising. We also didn't want to go away. We also felt that the Vikings was a very important part of the city, and we didn't want that to fade. Not that it would, but we felt that we needed to keep out there. So one of the things that we actually did do, because again very early on, and this is I think about more about the nature of York, we had a lot of people, a lot of businesses in York step forward when we flooded and said, what can we do? How can we help? And that was other museums, other attractions, just a huge array of people in York that wanted to help us. So one of the things that we did do, we said, thank you very much. Yes, you can help. Can we please put an exhibition in your facilities? So while we were cleaning JORVIK, we actually built 3 new exhibitions, which enabled us to put the collection out there and on display. So we did one exhibition in the York Theatre Royal. We did one in the church next door to JORVIK, which is owned by and run by a York Museums Trust, who also do the Castle Museum, the Yorkshire Museum and the Art Gallery. And then we put an exhibition also in York Minster. So we spread our Vikings around the city, and we did these exhibitions for the duration of the rebuild project. This also enabled us to keep all of our staff. And I should say one of my proudest things is that we kept every single member of staff while we were closed for 16 months. We didn't have to let anybody go. And that's a lot thanks to the insurance who enabled us to pay them, but also we gave them opportunities to do things. So we did a lot of training, we did a lot of skills development, we did a few community projects, and then we did these exhibitions as well. So it kept us alive in the city because we felt we needed to be. So we did that. And as I said, this version of JORVIK, we didn't want it to be the same as the last. We needed it to be in some ways, but we wanted to also build in new themes and new research. So this is just one of the skeletons, one of the full skeletons that we found in Coppergate. It's female, and during the period that we were closed, we did a lot of research just on this one specific skeleton, which enabled us to look at her DNA. We did an isotopic analysis, We know that she came from northern Norway, for example, and she's a very interesting figure because she was fairly old when she died, 45, 46. She had numerous problems, should we say. So she had hip dysplasia. We understand from the research that we've done that she used a crutch. But we also did things like working with Dundee University to recreate her face. So that's the image you can see there. And then the other thing that we did finally, as well as putting the skeleton in one of our galleries, we also created an animatronic figure of her as well. And you can see her on our ride, on our reconstruction of the Viking city. And I should also say we worked with York Hospital, so another one of the numerous partners that we developed during the time. We took the skeleton down to York Hospital and put her through the CT scanner so that we could actually find out a lot more about her remains as well. So just some quite small projects that led to sort of bigger themes, really. So this was just one of them that we were able to do while we were closed. We also brought in other themes which we'd never touched on before, and obviously they're a big part of Viking culture, Viking life. Storytelling, for example, poetry. We actually introduced this figure here who's a storyteller. We worked with the university, the York University and Bristol University, to translate all of our scripts, all of our narrative into Old English. We had Old Irish in there as well, actually, Anglo-Saxon, Viking, Old Norse, sorry. And then we worked with the university in York to record those scripts and the voices of our animatronics. And secondary to that, we did another bit of skills development with our team, whereby we taught them to speak in Old Norse and Old English, and one of my Vikings actually voices our storyteller, so that's quite a nice legacy for him. So again, just another smallish project, working with the university, working with specialists to enhance the reconstruction of the Viking city at Jorvik. We also worked in partnership with other people in the city. So here you just see two examples. What we wanted to put, and I know yesterday, and I missed it unfortunately, the idea of putting artistic pieces into the museum. We worked with the Minster Stoneyard to produce this really lovely recreation of a cross from a local church outside of York, and this stained glass panel. So we developed those partnerships as well. And then this just gives you, I'm not going to read through this, but this is the impact that Jorvik has. And you can see there, in terms of visitor numbers, how when we weren't there, we know that visitors went down in York, and when we came back, that is how they increase. So in the first year, we got 438,000 visitors through Jorvik. We raised 1.2 million, and yeah, that's the first day. That was the first day of Jorvik. That's a queue. Then out of Jorvik, though, we do a lot of other things. So we do the Viking Festival, and again, I'm not going to read through the figures, but that is the impact of the Viking Festival. We do it every single year. We do numerous events. This is Best Beard. You can enter, man, woman or child. There's a lovely beards here. Obviously, we get the very nice men's beards, but fantastic ladies' beards. And we had one made of jammy Dodgers one year. It was brilliant. We get Vikings coming in from all over the Viking world. Here's the march. We march across the city, hundreds of Vikings across the city every year, and you can see the impact there. So that's just one big event that we do. We now run 5 attractions in York. This is just one of the other ones. This is Dig. Dig is primarily based at primary children and families with children under 12, and it's an interactive experience where you can go in and you can dig and you can experience archaeology, and it's all about the archaeology of the city. So where you're digging, what you're finding is based on the archaeology that we have excavated as a trust in the city. So we have an area that's based on Coppergate, for example. We have an area that's based on Fishergate Cemetery, which is a medieval cemetery. And this is where we do the majority of our learning, our education programme, where we do workshops, outreach. We do Skype outreach to schools all over the world out of Dig. So this is just one sort of package that has developed out of Jorvik, and we do see this very much as a sister attraction to Jorvik. But we also run 3 other attractions in York as well. Just gives you an idea of what we do. It's about handling objects, And we also, one of the new things that we've done recently is we have devoted one of the rooms in Dig to a local community room, which we call Your Dig. And this is it's been a really nice innovation for us, and we've been doing this over the past year or so, with initially through Arts Council funding. And we've been working with small groups, very small groups in the local community. This one was working with Town Hall, which is a group, it's a suburb of York, not particularly well off, but they have a Roman kiln site. So we worked with them, we took artists in, we did finds identification, finds from pottery from your back garden type of events, and then worked with a potter, a specialist historic potter, for them all to create a face pot. We took those face pots up to Vindolanda and fired them in the kiln up there, and then we've got them on display. So what we do is co-curate, should I say, exhibitions that then go on display in Dig, and we work with various groups to do that. So this was just one of them. We've just worked with a local group in association with one of the universities in York, who are adults with special learning needs, and we co-curated a whole project with them with various different activities. And then finally, I just want to talk about our box of tricks, which is a working title for everything else that we do. And it's something that we're starting to develop now as part of our strategy for the Trust. And it's all about basically what through the work that we've been doing over the past 40 years, we have now got the vision that anything that we do in terms of archaeology, we can engage people in that activity. So we have everything from our attraction, so it's public presentation and public participation is the way we're looking at it. So it's everything from our attractions through to our site visits or our training or our outreach, and we're trying to package it up. And it's something quite difficult to talk about because it's all very new, but it's a way of looking at all of our activity really with a view to saying, well, if we're digging it up, we want to tell you about it, or we want to involve you in it. And this is something that we will be talking about and doing more of in the next few years, hopefully, as we work through how we can actually manage this. But as I say, there's a whole range of activity in that box of tricks, if you like. So finally, just to sort of, this is just a quick slide which talks about impact, and it is the impact of that hole in the ground that we started in the 1970s, and this is what has come out of it. So we have got a huge economic impact for York. We saw the difference that we made when Jorvik wasn't there. We get 500,000 visitors a year that we pull into York. Yes, there's a lot going on in York, it's not just us in York, but I think what we're particularly proud of, as I say, is the fact that everything came from this one hole in the ground, and there's so much more that we can do. And hopefully over the next few years, you know, we will do a lot more. And I think that's all I'm going to say today. Thank you.